Last week we left off with Microsoft's Internet Explorer holding the #1 position for web traffic after using less than scrupulous business practices to assert their dominance over Netscape Navigator. But it's pretty apparent that dominance didn't last. In fact, using Internet Explorer now is largely considered a joke. How could this happen? It mostly boils down to how Microsoft treated the newest version of Internet Explorer, IE 6. Internet Explorer 6, released with Windows XP in 2001, was essentially the final nail in the coffin for Netscape Navigator. Within a year of its release, IE accounted for 95% of all web traffic. Microsoft, no longer seeing competition from Netscape, began to slow down their update schedule and decided to synchronize updates for the browser with updates to the operating system. This meant that the next update to IE wouldn't come out until over a year after its initial release, and it would take 2 years for the next one after that. Considering that at one point, to catch up to Netscape Navigator, Microsoft had been pumping out updates as frequent as 2 months apart, it was evident that Internet Explorer wasn't competitively innovating, but rather surviving off of an already massive install base. All that it would take was a browser willing to innovate faster than Microsoft, and it turned out that that browser happened to be a rather familiar face. Right before Netscape had been bought out by AOL, the code was made open source and released as the Mozilla Application Suite. While it first met with strong support, it became apparent that the code was pretty messy, from being written for various platforms and a stronger focus on including features rather than writing elegant and efficient code. Not long after the code's initial release, Mozilla planned a roadmap to completely rewrite the codebase to be much more efficient. Part of this rewrite also included an ongoing project from the days of Netscape called NG Layout, a web rendering engine which was eventually renamed Gecko. Compared to other browsers at the time, Gecko was faster and took up nearly a tenth of the required memory, being able to fit on a single floppy disk. While the introduction of a new engine, along with a complete code rewrite, delayed the release of Mozilla's new browser, version 1.0 of what was called Phoenix, meant to be symbolic of the browser rising from the ashes of Netscape, was completed in 2002. The name Phoenix didn't stick though, since Mozilla received complaints from the BIOS manufacturer, Phoenix Technologies, and in response the name changed to Mozilla Firebird. Well, at least until the Firebird project, known for their database software of the same name, complained. Mozilla argued that, as long as the browser was referred to as Mozilla Firebird, the two applications wouldn't be confused, but they eventually relented and came up with the name Firefox, a nickname for the red panda. While at first only slowly eating away at IE's user base, Firefox's new features and improved security compared to the dated browser helped it gain popularity online. At nearly the same time of Firefox's development, Apple had been working on a browser of their own, based on the KHTML engine, which was eventually worked into a new engine called WebKit. Since 1997, an agreement with Microsoft had ensured that Internet Explorer was installed as the default browser on Macs. Yes, there was actually a time when Internet Explorer was on Mac. This 5-year agreement lasted all the way until macOS 10.2, and with it no longer in effect, Apple released Safari in 2003. And for macOS 10.3 and onwards, it included it as the default browser rather than IE. In fact, just like how Internet Explorer for a time was released on Macs as well as Windows, Apple reciprocated the Macs and Windows living together mass hysteria with releases of Safari for Windows from 2007 to 2012. At the time of its beta release, Safari was actually shown to be the fastest web browser available for Windows. With the support of Mac and iPhone users by being the pre-installed web browser, something Microsoft was no doubt familiar with, Safari also took off as a capable competitor to Internet Explorer. The success of Mozilla Firefox caught the attention of other companies as well, most notably Google, who as early as 2004 began to hire former browser developers from Microsoft and Mozilla. While originally cagey about joining in the fierce browser market, then CEO Eric Schmidt was so impressed by an early prototype that he changed his mind. The primary focus of this new browser for being fast and minimalist compared to the bloated browser UIs at the time led to its name Chrome. Since its release in 2008, Google Chrome has risen to be the most popular web browser online today, surpassing Firefox in early 2012 and IE a few months later. Currently, Chrome accounts for well over the majority of all web traffic, and still appears to be growing. This growth can mostly be attributed to Chrome's clean user interface, Google's massive web presence, and its inclusion with the Android OS for mobile devices. Internet Explorer may have been popular in 2002, but a combination of too few updates, rapidly changing web standards focusing on multimedia content, and the introduction of 3 incredibly competitive browsers created a perfect storm that not even a 95% market share could save. Granted, Microsoft even reached a point where they awaited the prolonged death of IE 6, But the decline of Internet Explorer 6 usage didn't necessarily mean that users were transitioning over to a new version of Internet Explorer. Given the incredible age of Internet Explorer and the stigma it carried from being so poorly out of date, Microsoft completely rewrote the browser, now called Edge, which is included with Windows 10. Currently, IE still maintains larger market share than Edge, which holds anywhere from 1 to 5%, but the days of the once ubiquitous IE are numbered, with even its creator Microsoft turning its back on the project.